Number 10. Spider-Man. Spider-Man is generally known for being one of the most powerful and most iconic heroes out there, but even he has his weaknesses. In fact, while many of them are not as famous as he is, some of them are pretty ridiculous, including his weakness to ethyl chloride, something that also slows and weakens spiders in the natural world. So if you were ever wondering if there might be a bug spray that you could use to fight against Spider-Man, the answer is actually kinda yes. Although make sure you bring a big spray can of ethyl chloride, as he is a lot bigger than your average spider. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you are loving what we are doing here at Top 10 Nerd, why not hit that subscribe button? It really helps us out and you get more of our content, so yay! Number 9. Superman. Superman is a character that we generally associate with strength, but not often weakness, which is interesting considering that he actually has quite a few weaknesses, probably the weirdest among them being magic. The best way to defeat Superman would simply be to become a magic user, because against them he becomes kinda powerless. When it comes to the explanation for why, a lot of people's theories surrounding this have to do with the fact that Superman's powers are naturally occurring, not magic based themselves, although this is usually used as a means to weaken him in the comics, as he doesn't have a natural means to defend against magic, and it's one of the few things like kryptonite that his invulnerability does not protect him from. In fact, narratively speaking, this is likely why he was made weak to magic to begin with, to help give him more to struggle against as a character, as he's kinda OP usually. Number 8. Rogue. Rogue was one of my favorite characters growing up, and I think what I loved about her so much was the tragedy of her story and her powers. But what's even more, I love the way that Rogue overcame them. Still, this would be a terrible weakness to have or have had, so that's why I'm including Rogue on our list. Rogue's powers allow her to adopt the powers of whoever she comes into physical contact with, actually taking their powers for herself, basically draining them. But that's not all Rogue takes with her touch. She can also take your memories and drain your life force. Or at least, she could do that. Rogue has since overcome this weakness by facing her fears. As it turns out, it was her own subconscious that was basically making it manifest. Number 7. Wonder Woman. One of Wonder Woman's original weaknesses seems to be in line with what she represents as a character: female power and strength. As an Amazon, Wonder Woman was initially also susceptible to losing her strength and power if she was ever restrained by a man. While some might see this as kind of a sexist weakness in the comics, I would actually see it as kind of being the opposite. To me, it's more meant to symbolize a history of oppression against women and its consequences. At least that's how I see that weakness. However, regardless of any greater meaning behind it, it was also a pretty silly weakness in the sense that it made Wonder Woman fairly easy to defeat under certain circumstances, and if she was going up against men, because if they just found her bracelets, that's kinda it. So I do have to say I'm glad this is no longer a rule for her in the comics today. Number 6. Nightcrawler. Well, Nightcrawler is a super powerful character overall, and an iconic and amazing character as well. He isn't actually the most powerful teleporter. This has to do with his weird restrictions and weaknesses surrounding teleportation. The big one being that he can only teleport by a max distance of about, I believe, 2 miles at a time. The other main one being the more that he teleports, the more exhausted he gets, and Kurt as a teleporter can tire fairly quickly if he's forced to make multiple jumps, which if he has to go far, he kind of has to do because each jump he can only go so far. Kurt does teleport through the Brimstone dimension, which I saw some people in the comics bringing up as like a super powerful thing, but this is actually more how his teleportation skills work. It's not necessarily something he's choosing to do, as he has to travel through the Brimstone dimension to get where he's going. So while yes, he can travel interdimensionally, it's only one dimension, and it's not really by choice, it's more by design. However, Kurt is an amazing character because of his limitations. That's what makes him so great. It means that when Kurt has to push it to save the day, and he often of course does just that because he really is a hero, he's often putting his life on the line for ideals he believes in, or for all of Earth or all of life itself, whatever he's defending. That's why we love Kurt. Number 5. Green Lantern. Hal Jordan is Green Lantern, or one of the Green Lanterns anyways, and as a Green Lantern he has a pretty iconic and ridiculous weakness, or at least for a very long time in the comics he did have that weakness. Hal had a weakness to the color yellow. In fact, all Green Lanterns did for a while. This was as a result of parallax existing within the Green Lantern Corps' central battery. Having the entity of fear within the battery caused all Green Lanterns to develop a weakness to yellow, something that was used in All-Star Batman and Robin in Frank Miller's alternate reality to weaken and torment Hal Jordan's Green Lantern. In the All-Star Batman and Robin comic, Batman and Robin basically paint themselves and an entire safe house yellow, just to teach Hal a lesson about meddling in Batman's affairs. Number 4. Black Cat. Black Cat is an anti-hero over at Marvel Comics, who is generally known for being an ally and sometimes romantic partner of Spider-Man. While she typically is shown as being a skilled thief with acrobatic skills and superb training and experience as a fighter, at least that's how she was depicted initially, she doesn't usually have any superpowers to speak of. However, at one point, she did just have straight up powers, and this happened for Black Cat when the Kingpin granted her wish of getting them. However, because this was the Kingpin, it of course did not work out exactly as Felicia had planned. She ended up with bad luck powers, which were extremely useful when fighting an enemy, but not so useful when with an ally or anyone else, as they actually affected not just her opponents, but like anyone who was close to her, which means that Peter suffered from them as well. To make matters worse, Felicia kept her powers a secret from him, which ended up driving a wedge between the two when it came to their romantic and working relationships with one another. Number 3. Green Lantern. Alan Scott used to have a hilarious weakness, similar to someone else on our list actually. Let me know in the comments when and if you figure out who I'm talking about here. Alan Scott had a weakness to wood. The explanation for why and how this weakness developed was explained later by the fact that Alan was snuck up on and basically attacked using a wooden club, sort of, and as a result he subconsciously manifested this as a weakness of his, due to him mistaking it for one when in reality, you know, it just hurts to get smacked by a piece of wood, because that just hurts. Thankfully, Alan Scott has overcome this, and this strange weakness that was actually originally tied to being the hero Green Lantern in the comics no longer bothers Alan, or any other Green Lanterns for that matter. Number 2. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is a super interesting character. On one hand, she is extremely powerful and can never lose. She can even potentially have her power utilized to manipulate the stakes of other competitions that she's pulled into. However, this also implies that there are times when she has zero control over her powers, in the sense that she cannot influence the result of an unbalanced battle. In fact, her powers will pull her to serve the side that will be victorious, regardless of whether or not she wants to, in terms of what her mind or her heart is saying to her. This has meant that Iska has been forced to turn her back on her own people, the mutants of Arakko, more than once. She has also had to fight against family, colleagues, and friends before as a result. Although the one thing she can control at times is kind of how she approaches the fighting part of, you know, the battle. Meaning that if she has the option, you know, she can try to fight others involved as opposed to those that she is specifically close to. Like during her fight against planet Arakko and the Great Ring, when she was teleported away to the planet's ocean by Nightcrawler and chose to stay there fighting the planet's creatures in the name of Uranos and the Eternals, as opposed to fighting her own people directly, or continuing to fight them directly. Number 1. Power Girl. Power Girl probably has one of the weirdest weaknesses around. Despite being a Kryptonian who is on the level of Superman when it comes to her powers and her strength, she can easily be harmed simply if you use organic materials to hurt her. You know that saying about sticks and stones, which may break your bones? Well, for Power Girl, despite having super durability and invulnerability, this is true. Sticks and stones could break her bones, but industrial steel probably wouldn't hurt her for some reason. Raw organic materials, which have been unprocessed, are revealed to be a weakness of Power Girl's in Supergirl issue number 16 from the 1996 series. Power Girl shares this revelation with her alternate self from the main continuity at the time, who was shocked by the revelation. Which, I mean, fair enough, I would be too if I were Linda Danvers, who was Supergirl at that time. However, I will say I don't think that Kara has this weakness anymore in the comics, thank goodness, but in the 90s, it was a thing, and it was there for some reason.
Number 10. Batman's inability to trust. For a superhero with no powers, Batman is able to do remarkably well against much more powerful villains, and is able to stand next to some of the most powerful heroes in the DC universe without looking out of place. And while yes, technically you could count the fact that he's susceptible to being shot or stabbed as a weakness, his greatest weakness is his inability to trust anyone, even his closest allies. Batman is constantly finding himself in situations where he doesn't give his allies the full picture, and as a result, he or his teammates are put in unnecessary danger. The most famous example of this comes from the Tower of Babel storyline, when it was revealed that Batman had developed detailed plans about how to destroy each of his friends and teammates. Ra's al Ghul managed to steal these plans and do a lot of damage to the heroes before Batman realized what was happening. Frankly, it is only through dumb luck that none of the League members were killed in this incident. When the dust settled, the team was furious with Batman for breaching their trust and putting all of them in danger. As the writer of the story, Mark Waid, recently said in an interview where he talked about this arc, Batman's sin to the Justice League was not that he had these plans to counteract each of them. It was that he didn't tell them. If he had just said to Superman, "Listen, just in case you want to know, I have a backup in case you ever go nuts," Superman would go, "Awesome, that's good to hear." This is a lesson that Batman has yet to really absorb, despite the amount of times his secrecy has blown up in his face, such as when he kept the Batman Who Laughs prisoner under the Hall of Justice without telling anyone. Number 9. Zatanna has to be able to speak. Zatanna is a stage magician who happens to be capable of real magic. She is capable of casting powerful enchantments that can range from turning enemies into rabbits or erasing their memories. She casts these spells by saying what she wants backwards. For example, when she wants to turn rain into flowers, she says Niar Semo Keb Suru Wolf. The one limitation on this power is that to cast these spells, she has to be able to speak the incantations. So, unlike other magic-wielding characters like, say, Doctor Strange, who could cast a spell by wordlessly waving their hands, if someone manages to gag Zatanna, she is incapable of doing anything to further defend herself, as happened when she was captured by the Joker, who slit her throat and threw her into a water tank. However, she was eventually able to heal herself by using blood magic and writing the spell backwards in her own blood. Number 8. Daredevil's radar sense gets confused. When Matt Murdock was a young boy, he was hit by a truck that was carrying a radioactive isotope. This isotope got in his eyes and blinded him, but also heightened his other senses, allowing him to develop his trademark radar sense, which helps him navigate the world and fight crime as Daredevil. While this does give him several advantages, it is also prone to being overstimulated by kinda random things. For example, if he ends up underwater, he can easily lose his bearings and have trouble telling up from down. Even worse though is his weakness to rain. This weakness is kinda inconsistent, as in other versions of the character, like the Ben Affleck movie, rain allows him to see things more clearly, but in the comics it is a serious handicap for the character. In issue 25 of the 2011 Daredevil series, Matt is fighting a villain named Ikari who has a similar radar sense. The fight leads them to a sporting goods store where Matt's narration reveals that he has always been worried that a villain will someday think to use a sprinkler system against him, as rain negates his sense of smell, overwhelms his hearing, and makes his radar sense practically useless, cutting his by 95%. Considering how often it seems to rain in Marvel's New York and how dependent Daredevil is on his radar sense, this is a pretty rough weakness. Number 7. Black Canary if she gets a sore throat. Dinah Lance is the second hero to use the alias of Black Canary, with her mother being the first. While her mother was limited to being a capable hand-to-hand fighter and being able to train canaries to do amazing feats, her daughter has the ability to unleash the powerful canary cry. How she manages this varies depending on the continuity, with it sometimes being a byproduct of a wizard's curse, and sometimes being due to her carrying the metahuman gene. But what the power does remains consistent. The canary cry allows Dinah to control her vocal cords to generate a powerful sonic attack that can deafen her opponents, and when she really lets loose, can destroy metal and even kill people. However, she needs to be in good vocal health to achieve this, and if she ever has laryngitis, she is unable to unleash the canary cry. However, even without the cry, she is one of the best martial artists in the DC universe, so she still manages okay. Number 6. Wolverine's metal skeleton. Wolverine has always been a powerful mutant sporting claws and a healing factor that makes him practically unkillable. Between that and his super acute senses, his more than a century of combat training, and his berserker rage, he is not someone you want as an enemy. These abilities got an upgrade when the Weapon X program got a hold of him and coated his skeleton and claws with an indestructible metal called adamantium. While this does make him even more durable, it does come with certain drawbacks. For example, it does make it much more difficult for Wolverine to swim, and foes often take advantage of this, trapping the clawed Canadian underwater and making him experience the feeling of drowning until he manages to escape. The other drawback to this, of course, is that it makes him vulnerable to magnetism. While this wouldn't be too bad of a weakness for most heroes, I mean, how often do you really come across a giant magnet in the world? Wolverine has the misfortune of being a member of the one superhero superhero team that is constantly fighting against a character who is able to manipulate metal with his mind. At best, this makes him immobile for most of the encounters against Magneto, and at worst, it results in him getting his skeleton torn out. Number 5. Snowbird can't leave Canada. When the Inuit goddess of the Northern Lights, Nelvana, needed an agent on Earth to help prevent the return of the evil mystical great beasts, she mated with a human and had the shaman, Michael Two Young Men, use his magic to help deliver the child on Earth. Naria was given a decent grab bag of powers, the most notable of which is the ability to transform into any creature found in the Canadian Arctic. She has used this power to become owls, bears, and even whales, which makes her a formidable force against her enemies. However, due to Shaman not being specific enough when casting the spell that bound her spirit to the land, she is somewhat limited in where she can go. If Snowbird goes or is taken beyond the Canadian borders, she grows weak and sick. The longer she is out of Canada, the weaker she gets, and if she stays out of the country too long, she could even die. This weakness was discovered in Alpha Flight number 12 when the team learned that their leader, Guardian, had walked into a trap set by the evil Omega Flight in New York and teleported to his location to try and save him. Snowbird immediately became emaciated and old and nearly died, and was therefore more of a hindrance than a help in this scenario. Snowbird died in a later comic and was eventually brought back, and as a result, this weakness seems to have disappeared, as she has since traveled outside of Canada and has even left the planet without any ill effects. Number 4. Martian Manhunter and his addiction. John Jones is an alien from the planet Mars who has insanely strong telepathic powers that allow him to read and control minds. He also has super strength and the ability to shapeshift, and the ability to become intangible and phase through objects, making him a very difficult hero to defeat. For many years, Martian Manhunter had a psychosomatic weakness to fire that would cause him to lose the use of his powers and be burned. This weakness is kind of a problem when you consider how many superhero battles result in buildings or cars catching on fire, but what I want to focus on is a lesser known weakness, his cookie addiction. In Martian Manhunter Volume 2, number 24, we learn that John has developed an intense love of Choco's cookies, the DC equivalent to Oreos. When Blue Beetle and Booster Gold decide to play a prank on him by stealing his cookies and buying all the Chocos in a mile radius, we learn that when Martian Manhunter goes too long without his fix, he becomes a mindless Hulk-like creature who angrily smashes up the city, screaming about how he needs his cookies. His rampage isn't stopped until Booster Gold and Blue Beetle lead him to a warehouse full of Chocos where he greedily begins to devour them. Once Manhunter is back to normal, Batman discovers that the chemicals in Chocos, though relatively harmless to human biology, are extremely addictive to Martian physiologies. So yeah, fire is a bad weakness, but a cookie dependency issue is way worse. Number 3. Domino suffers from electorophobia. Nina Thurman has the mutant ability to subconsciously manipulate probability when she finds herself in stressful or dangerous situations in order to give herself the best possible outcome. In simpler terms, she's extremely lucky. If she is shot at, she will instinctively know exactly the right way to duck and dodge her way past the bullets, or the enemy's gun might simply jam. She can make the highly improbable happen in order to survive almost any situation, and it has made her a very difficult character to defeat, but not impossible. In Deadpool Volume 4, number 17, the Merc with a Mouth is planning on assassinating one of the X-Men's most vocal critics in order to earn a place on the team. The X-Men of course do not want to be embroiled in this kind of scandal and send Domino to deal with Deadpool. She ties him to a bed and the two talk, with Wade confessing that he is terrified of cows and Domino revealing that she is terrified of chickens. You'd think she was kidding or lying, but later in the issue when Deadpool escapes and goes after the target again, Domino and Wolverine chase after him only to be taken out of commission when crawling through an air vent when they end up face to face with a chicken. Domino is paralyzed with fear and unable to continue on, which delays her and Wolverine long enough for Deadpool to get away. Considering how much poultry seems to affect her, Domino is lucky she doesn't come across them more often. Number 2. Mon-El and Lead. One day when Superman was just a young super boy, he looked to the sky and saw a crashing rocket. He intercepted it and discovered a young man inside with a locket from Clark's Kryptonian parents, Jor-El and Lara Lor-Van, wishing him luck on his travels. The young man had suffered amnesia, but the fact that he had the same powers as Superboy led Clark to deduce that this was his long-lost brother from Krypton. He named him Mon-El, and the two began fighting crime together while enjoying their newfound sense of family. However, Superboy soon became suspicious of his new brother, as Krypto didn't seem to recognize him, and his belt was made from a metal not found on Krypton's periodic table. As he did a lot, Not in the Silver Age, Clark began putting Mon-El through a series of elaborate and convoluted tests to prove he was an imposter. He took a bunch of lead balls and painted them green before throwing them into space. He then went to a nearby planet with Mon-El to play baseball. When the green balls showed up, Superboy pretended they were kryptonite meteors and pretended to be affected. When Mon-El also began acting sick, Clark took this as proof that he was an imposter, but as Mon-El's amnesia wore off, he revealed that he was actually from the planet Daxam and had met Jor-El on his travels. As a Daxamite, he had the same powers as Superboy, but really did have a vulnerability to lead. While a Kryptonian would return to full health when kryptonite was removed, a Daxamite exposed to lead was doomed to a slow and painful death. Superboy was forced to put Mon-El in the Phantom Zone until he could find a cure. Mon-El has had a few adventures since then as a member of the Legion of Superheroes, but the fact that he could be killed by a relatively common element is pretty dumb. Number 1. Aquaman gets dehydrated. As the son of a human and an Atlantean, Arthur Curry is capable of some pretty astounding feats. He is able to survive underwater and swim at incredible speeds. He has super strength and expert fighting skills, as well as the ability to control the oceans when wielding the Trident of Poseidon. Oh, and he can also talk to and control fish, an ability that might seem lame until he attacks you with a megalodon. However, he also has a weakness that is pretty silly. If Aquaman doesn't go back in the water every hour, he begins to grow weak and dehydrated. The severity of this weakness depends on who is writing the comic and what continuity you're in, but the Silver Age version of this character was particularly vulnerable. A great example of this is in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 115, when Jimmy developed the same powers as Aquaman. A villain impersonating Superman was able to trick Aquaman and Jimmy into entering a competition where they stayed out of the water for an hour and then crawled through the desert trying not to die, as the fake Superman taunted them with a pitcher of water. For those wondering, Jimmy won the competition and was made the new king of Atlantis. After they defeated the villain, he ceded the throne back to Aquaman, but the fact that Jimmy beat him in a nefarious but fair competition, and by rights is the true king of Atlantis, makes you realize why Aquaman has so much trouble being taken seriously.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Adamantium and Vibranium. Perhaps one of the greatest superheroes to go toe-to-toe with the Incredible Hulk is Wolverine. Especially in the Old Man Logan storyline, we find the Hulk as one of the few remaining superheroes on Earth. Now, this is when the Hulk had a little Hulk gang running around. They were actually responsible for the death of Wolverine's family. So when Wolverine came around to fight it out with the Hulk, he just straight up swallowed him. That's the thing about being a beast like this, you can literally just eat your problems away. But thanks to Wolverine's claws, he's able to easily tear his way out. See, Wolverine, X-23, and the Black Panther are all able to pierce the Hulk's skin. We can see this take place in World War Hulk X-Men. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really helps us now, especially while we're working from home up here in Canada. Thank you so much for being patient. You guys are the best. Now let's get right back to this list. Number 9, toxins. In the Incredible Hulk Volume 2, Issue 110, we catch up with Banner after the spaceship that took him to Sakaar blew up. This explosion took out many of his new otherworldly friends, including his new queen. So now he came back to Earth ready to dish out revenge, but thankfully Scorpion, Carmilla Black, injected him with a toxin that counteracts the Hulk's healing factor. Her arm is packed with a cocktail of new toxins designed by S.H.I.E.L.D. to goof up his gamma-powered physiology. Number 8, rage nullification. See, part of the problem lies in the solution sometimes. In the MCU, we see Natasha able to bring Banner back after the green guy has punched the enemies out of existence. All she has to do is rub his hands and say the sun is getting real low, and voila, now we have Bruce Banner back. In the comics, this is also a weakness. When that rage gets neutralized, Banner is extremely vulnerable, seeing as he's now just a scientist at that point. Betty Ross can also calm down the Hulk, and she does so in issue 141 of The Incredible Hulk. And Sentry as well was able to calm him in Sentry Hulk issue 1. Telepaths have also been known to be able to do this as well. They just need empathy potential and they can emulate this effect. The Inhuman Randall Jessup has the ability to cast out negative emotions, so he can come into play here as well. Number 7, magic users. In Avengers Age of Ultron, when Wanda Maximoff was introduced first as a villain, she played mind games with the entire team. In Wakanda, her and her brother met up with Ultron, and when the team arrives to stop the vibranium deal, Wanda then uses her magic to weaken the team. She of course gets Banner and he hulks out. Big time. Now at this point in the MCU, like I mentioned, Black Widow was the only key to bringing Banner back out of the green guy. All she has to do is stroke his palm, tell him how the sun's getting low, and Bruce is back, naked and afraid. But this time, Natasha was under some spells herself. She was too busy reliving her dark past, while the Hulk just exploded and broke Johannesburg. It took Iron Man and his new Veronica Hulkbuster armor to come and knock some sense into him, or rather, knock some sense out of him. Number 6, enchanted weapons. While Wanda and her magic hands sure do a number on Bruce, enchanted weapons are also effective. We see this in Defenders issue 1. Now at first the Hulk thinks that he's above enchanted beings. He's like waving hands, glowing fingers, those are all stupid things. The Hulk can smash, I mean who needs magic anyways? So his plan was to just smash and smash because he never gets tired. Then in comes Strange and he wraps the Hulk in the crimson bands of Sidorak, all the while the Hulk is begging to be let free. He just wants to destroy something. He's boasting the entire time about how he never gets tired and just wants something to hit, something the same size as him. And then when Necrodamus enters the fight wielding an enchanted blade, well, the Hulk sure feels that one. Number 5, his lack of patience. One of the most intimidating factors of the Incredible Hulk is that he will punch first and ask questions later. It's great, except for when a plan is needed. He doesn't believe anybody is more powerful than him, so he lacks this concern in combat. He's overconfident that he'll win, and in Marvel Team Up issue 13, we see him run into the battle to take on the Skrull Titanus without even consulting the team, and of course, this is the reason he's the first to go down. Even in Avengers Infinity War, he surprises Thanos by jumping out at him, but the element of surprise isn't the only trick. It's not the key here. You can't just jump out, scream, and then start punching people all the time. Some of the time, definitely, but all the time, no way. Thanos punched him so hard he retired. Perhaps patience and better timing could have sufficed. Number 4, gamma radiation. Halloween was always awesome growing up. I would eat the candy while I was collecting the candy. I was just giving myself more and more energy to collect, and I did good too. But too much candy and now you're sweating. Now you feel sick, you're done for the night. Just the sight of a Kit Kat makes you wanna Too much of a good thing sure can hinder your night. Same goes with the Hulk when it comes to gamma radiation. Sure, it's the exact thing that powers him up so he's able to throw statues at his coworkers, but too much gamma radiation and it's bad news. Like in the Future Imperfect storyline, for example, Professor Hulk travels to a dark future where he crosses paths with, well, himself. Future stronger version of himself, the Maestro. The Hulk could not beat this guy, no chance. So instead, he tricked the Maestro and got him to time travel back to the past where that first gamma bomb went off, the same bomb that created the Hulk in the first place. So when the bomb goes off, now there's too much gamma in the mix, and this results in the passing of the Maestro. Too much gamma, too many Kit Kats, tomatoes. Number 3, the Power Cosmic. The Silver Surfer is a big name on the list of the Hulk's weaknesses because the Silver Surfer possesses the Power Cosmic, which was given to him by Galactus himself. So now he has the ability to absorb and tap into ambient cosmic energy and channel it throughout his body. And at this point, he can take out planets if he feels like it. And the Hulk is not a planet. And most of the time he and the Silver Surfer cross paths, it usually ends up with the Silver Surfer coming out on top. Some powers you can't just punch away, you know? Number 2, the Puppy Bomb. Okay, whatever you're imagining in your head as soon as I said the Puppy Bomb, it's much nicer than that. It's not a bomb full of puppies. We're not just gonna launch golden retrievers at Bruce Banner and hopes that it helps, I don't know. But we are launching cute puppies. That's something we are doing. In Indestructible Hulk issue 1, S.H.I.E.L.D. pulls out all the stops to calm down the big guy. And I mean all the stops. Yeah, they just launch a bunch of puppies at him and he goes from ah to I mean that ought to do a trick. If I saw one puppy, I'd be like, okay. But if I saw like a bunch of puppies, I'd be like, okay. And number 1, Bruce Banner. Other Hulks are able to contain their anger issues while growing into the green monster. She-Hulk is calm and cool and collect. She's got a hand on the wheel. Amadeus Cho, same idea. He's able to keep the angries out as long as he eats food. He keeps the brain going rather than the muscles, you know? But the Incredible Hulk is different, unfortunately. See, Bruce's childhood has something to do with it. His father was awful to him, really awful. He got mad at Bruce because of his high intellect. He ended up going to prison for taking out his mother, so Bruce already had a lot of pain inside him, even as a young kid, before Gamma stuff. The ghost of his father constantly haunted him, and when the Hulk comes out and takes over Banner, those early childhood memories are the fuel behind the fists. It's part of what makes the Hulk story so unique, that Banner has to fight this dark version of himself while also being a superhero.
Number 10, Port Grind. Port Grind apparently has the same powers as Eddie Brock, Anti-Hero, and Venom of the 616 reality, but he also is a wild boar. And not even the wild kind of wild boar, more like a wild boar from a cartoon animated universe, where reality is warped somewhat due to everyone living like a toon. Think Toontown from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. This is the home universe of alternate Spider-Man Spider-Ham, who is a pig. You may remember Spider-Ham from the animated film Into the Spider-Verse, but there are all sorts of toon-like animal folk as well, including this boar version of Venom. Number 9. Hybrid. While any of the 4 symbiotes that make up Hybrid are considered pretty tame, the 4 of them together is a little less tame. The cool thing about Hybrid is it combines the abilities and power sets of 4 of the Life Foundation symbiotes: Agony, Riot, Phage, and Lasher. However, there is also an element of weakness in their union. These symbiotes prefer being together because they are kind of like a little family unit and know that it makes them stronger ultimately. So break Hybrid up, separate its components, and not only will these symbiotes be weaker overall, but they also probably will be emotionally not great either, because they don't really like when you split them up. They don't like forced breakups. This kind of gives Hybrid an extra weakness in comparison to the standard Sound and Fire ones. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more symbiote lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Maniac. Mania, or Maniac as they were later known, is a symbiote that split off from Venom due to some crazy going-ons, which we'll actually dive into more later on this list. Mania, as it was known then, bonded to Andy Benton, a friend of Flash Thompson's who also happened to be a student at the time. This is back when Flash was a substitute gym teacher. Flash thought he was just sending a part of his own symbiote to Andy, but it was revealed that this part of Venom was its own thing, and it became known as Mania. Mania was pretty powerful while bonded with Andy, but as a symbiote on its own, it possessed just your average standard set of powers, making it not really very strong in comparison to some of the most powerful ones out there. Maniac was the name the symbiote became known by when it left Andy and was taken by the criminal Lee Price. Later on, Maniac would be killed in the Absolute Carnage event and absorbed. Number 7. Agony. Agony is one of the 4 Life Foundation symbiotes which were forcefully harvested from the Venom symbiote while it was their prisoner. Poor Venom and Eddie. And poor baby symbiotes. Poor symbiotes. The Life Foundation acknowledged that Agony was still too young to control a host, and so bonded it initially to a security officer with the Life Foundation. I assume to kind of help combat Agony's lack of experience. What is unique about Agony? While not as powerful as their parent Venom, they were given enhanced muscles by the government, making them one of the physically strongest of the 5 symbiotes that were harvested, and they can spit acid as well as absorb other chemicals to later use themselves. So it's not nothing, but it's nothing as crazy as what some symbiotes are capable of. Number 6. Payback Variant. This symbiote wasn't a symbiote in the same way as the ones from Clintar are. It instead was a being of pure electromagnetic energy that bonded with S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Mavis Trent. We don't know much about this new alien symbiotic species, but we do know that it bonding with Trent resulted in her getting superpowers and a cool new silver form that she could access whenever she was in a state of bliss or extreme joy or happiness. While this is a really cool idea for a character, symbiote, and design, the fact remains that the Payback symbiote was not as powerful as the ones that we usually see from Clintar. It did however come with some superhuman boosts to strength, speed, durability, and a healing factor. It also allowed Trent the power to fly and some cool electromagnetic and telepathic powers. Still, no shapeshifting and probably not as strong as someone like Venom or Carnage. Number 5. Riot. Physically, Riot is probably one of the most strongest Life Foundation symbiotes. It appears to be the largest in size when it comes to natural muscle mass, and its unique ability, which admittedly isn't super unique, is it can create blunt weapons. Or rather, it's not a really unique ability, but more a distinct preference of the symbiote. I mean, all symbiotes can create blunt weapons, but Riot prefers to create blunt weapons, possibly because they possess so much strength, which would bolster their force when it comes to their hits. Like all other Clintar symbiotes, Riot is also weak to sonic and heat attacks, and being part of the hybrid group, prefers to be bonded with the other life symbiotes, or at least near them whenever it can be. Number 4. Venom Clone. This is where Mania came from originally. That whole weird thing I said that I would dive into earlier, here we go. The Venom Clone, as it was originally known, was created from a piece of the Venom symbiote's tongue that came into the possession of the Ararat Corporation. The goal for the clone initially was to use it to destroy all life on Earth. A pretty big goal for just a little piece of Venom's tongue. The clone, however, did somewhat live up to its potential in the sense that, while it didn't kill all life on Earth, it did kill some people, and it did escape. In the end, however, the clone was defeated when it fought against the OG Venom and ultimately was absorbed back into it. Or so we thought. Later on, we'd get Mania from this, who technically is part of the clone, but the Venom clone had its whole story before that happened, so I kinda thought it would be fair to count it as a separate symbiote, as Mania was still kind of its own thing. And Mania was very different than the Venom clone, in terms of personality anyways. Number 3. Lasher. I feel pretty bad for putting Lasher up high on this list, because I actually like Lasher. But you know, Lasher was once bonded with a dog. Granted, dogs are really cool, so no hate towards dogs, but I just mean when that is where you are in comparison to other giant symbiotes like Venom and Carnage, it makes you seem a little smaller than the rest. Although admittedly, I would love to read a comic that was about Lasher's adventures as a doggo symbiote. More dog comics please. Lasher's unique ability as a member of the Life Foundation symbiote crew was remote symbiosis, which also admittedly is not the most powerful of skills, though it is quite unique I think, so it's got that going for it. Also fun fact, Lasher got its name from this unique power, which we learned about through it being bonded to its dog host. Get it? Lasher. Like a leash lasher, you know? Number 2. Poisons. While the poisons aren't actually symbiotes in the sense of alien beings from Clintar, they are symbiotic aliens, and I think are admittedly an overall weaker race in comparison to the symbiotes from Clintar. To me, the poisons feel like wannabe symbiotes, and I know that they're just different, but they are also so similar as well. It just makes me feel like the poisons were trying to be what Clintar symbiotes were, but then they got wiped out because they weren't as powerful. Their weakness ended up being their hive queen. Once she was destroyed, the whole thing fell apart. I guess that's kind of what the King in Black is for the symbiotes of Clintar, except that he was also asleep for forever and they mostly got on fine. And also he can be replaced, as we've seen Eddie Brock become the new King in Black following Null's defeat. Also Carnage is I think now trying to steal that role. Everyone wants to be the King in Black. Number 1. Crowbar. Crowbar has a really tragic story and was a symbiotic alien that appeared in Venom Seed of Darkness issue number 1. Crowbar was a space explorer and sought to learn more about other civilizations and alien races, as his alien race most valued diversity of mind and of thought. He was corrupted by humanity's darker side and the inner demon of the id, which he came across while bonded to his host, scientist Nigel Donlevy. Eddie Brock ended up defeating Crowbar with a camera flash, as a being described as living darkness, light it turned out was, you know, one of its weaknesses. However, it was really the dark side of humanity that did Crowbar in. Eddie's camera flash snapped it out of the violent rage that he was in, which it turns out had been brought upon by his bond to Donlevy and learning more about humanity. Crowbar was so upset at being corrupted by the darkness of humanity, in order to prevent it from being spread throughout the rest of the cosmos, he decided to take his own life. Pretty weak in terms of his more fragile psyche and weakness to light on a planet like Earth that also has a very bright sun and very bright artificial lights, but pretty strong in terms of how depressing his story is and how it like reflects on humanity and all of the terrible things about us. Strong story, weak symbiote.
Number 10. Martian Manhunter and Fire. Now I'm not gonna lie, I am also not the biggest fan of fire either, and I would absolutely hate being set on fire for so many reasons, but for such a powerful hero who can shapeshift at a molecular level, change his entire genetic makeup to let him pass through solid objects, withstand ferocious attacks, or bend light waves around his body, it just seems a little silly, right? Not to mention that he comes from Mars, otherwise known as the Red Planet or the Fire Star. So why is this one of his biggest weaknesses? Well, long before Martian Manhunter even existed, a race of aliens known as the Burning caused some serious damage with fire in order to create their offspring, which, needless to say, people weren't too happy about. After the Guardians of the Universe separated the offspring into the White Martians and the Green Martians, they were all imbued with a congenital pyrophobia, aka a fear of fire. So it kind of makes sense why he's so afraid of it. Not only does it physically hurt him, but it also scrambles his most prized weapon of all, his mind. This fear and weakness is so intense that when he's exposed to flame, he has the capacity to self-destruct, either combusting into bits or dissolving into rivers of Martian liquid. Want to know more about the Martian Manhunter? Well then check him out in his first appearance in 1986's Justice League of America, number 255. Number 9. The Flash and Being Too Fast. At first, I've gotta say this one confused me so much because that's kind of the Flash's whole thing, right? Well, when it comes to Barry Allen, his speed might be his greatest strength, but being too fast puts his life in mortal danger. In Crisis on Infinite Earths, we see the Flash use his super speed to thwart the Anti-Monitor's evil plan, but the speed vortex he creates to stop the villain's antimatter cannon from firing is so fast that it sweeps the Flash away along with it. He ends up being stranded for 23 years in the Speed Force, you know, that mystical energy field that gives all the speedsters their powers, and spends that whole time running and trying to figure out how to get back. Basically, what happened is that Barry ran way too fast for his body to handle and he atomized himself. Thought to be dead by his closest friends, including Wally West, who took up the Flash mantle in his absence, Barry's apparent death was a huge shock for everyone, and also entirely his own fault. Check out more of the Flash for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1956's Showcase, number 4. Number 8. Power Girl and Raw Materials. You'd think that being weak to kryptonite would be their only weakness, considering how easy it seemed for people to get their hands on it. But Kara Zor-El from Earth 2 actually had another pretty big weakness at one point. They were vulnerable to unprocessed natural materials such as branches and rocks for a short while. This also includes stone, dirt, and sand. Basically anything that can be found on Earth that isn't man-made. In Peter David's Supergirl Volume 4 number 16, she gets knocked to the ground and impaled by a pretty big tree branch, which in her defense would put anyone on the ground. Supergirl helps yank out the branch, and with this weirdly sociopathic smile on her face, she asked, "What, are you vulnerable to wood?" It took a second, but after she was no longer in pain, she replied, "Worse, to any raw, unprocessed natural materials. So, sticks and stones really can break my bones." God, dumb joke and even dumber weakness. Check her out for yourself in her first appearance in 2011's Flashpoint Volume 2, number 5. Number 7. Adam Strange and Forced Deportation. Who knew that archaeologists could also be superheroes? Well, apparently Adam Strange did, because that is exactly what he is. He inadvertently found himself on the planet Ran and was gifted with all the powers of a superhero in Mystery in Space, and it's not exactly explained why. Sounds pretty great, right? I mean, what could possibly be his weakness? Well, it's not actually his fault or in his control. This life of bliss he lives on Ran is frequently interrupted by his rather inconvenient transportations back to Earth, where he has no powers at all. The technology responsible for bringing him to Ran, the Zeta Beam, only allows him to remain there for as long as it's transmitting back to Earth. And as it takes the beam a few good years to reach Strange's home planet, it's not exactly easy to catch a ride back. Strange might have been recruited as Ran's savior, but his timing issues really make this role more of a temporary gig. He could be midway through his heroics before vanishing without a single trace. He even left his wife to nearly get eaten by a tiger once. Luckily, as Alan Moore's Swamp Thing series clarified, the Iranians are more than capable of looking after themselves when Strange isn't around, and thank goodness for that, because I wouldn't be relying on Strange much either. Give his story a read for yourself, starting with 1986's Outsiders, number 6. Number 6. Human Torch and Asbestos. Now, don't get me wrong, Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch, is a force to be reckoned with. Not only can he create, absorb, and manipulate fire, which is pretty awesome on its own, but his Nova Flame is hot enough to vaporize the particles of anything in his way, whether it's a bullet, a building, a bad guy, etc. Interestingly enough though, his powers can't seem to penetrate asbestos. Now this doesn't seem like much of a weakness now, given that asbestos is now banned across most of the world, but back when the Human Torch was first created by Stan Lee and Ernest Hart in 1963, it was a much more common thing, as it was used to insulate pipes and wires, soundproof rooms, and even make cheap garden furniture. In Strange Tales number 111, Asbestos Man came into play, dialed up Johnny Storm, and arranged a showdown between the two. The Human Torch wasn't really all that into it, but he agreed nonetheless and showed up completely underprepared. Asbestos Man used his super asbestos suit, a fire retardant shield, and a fisherman's net to go toe-to-toe with the Human Torch, and he wreaked havoc on the Human Torch until he developed mesothelioma and needed an oxygen tank to stay alive. Moral of the story, kids, is always prepare for anything, and please, don't breathe asbestos. Check out more of the Human Torch's story, starting with 1961's Fantastic Four, number 1. Number 5. Wonder Woman and being tied up. Superheroes don't come much more kick than Wonder Woman. She's an extremely skilled warrior with enough power to take on the gods and win, and she's shown time and time again that she can hold her own in the world of comic book heroes. However, the Golden Age Wonder Woman was bound by an interesting Amazonian rule that really did not work in her favor. Known as Aphrodite's Law, it states that when an Amazon girl permits a man to chain her bracelets of submission together, she becomes weak as other women in a man-ruled world. This gender-specific weakness lasted from Wonder Woman's debut in 1942 right through to the mid-80s, when DC finally retconned this out for good. This weakness is less literal than metaphorical, meant to demonstrate Marston's argument that women are only vulnerable to men when they choose to be. But still, I am very glad that this was gotten rid of for good. Check out Wonder Woman more for yourself, starting with her first appearance in 1942's All-Star Comics, Volume 1, number 8. Number 4. Gladiator and Self-Confidence. Cal Arc, aka Gladiator, is arguably one of the most powerful comic book heroes ever, gifted with planet-shattering strength, super speed, heat vision, frost breath, and a few psionic abilities as well. He's a superhero anyone would love to be. However, even though he is loved, he never really learned to love himself, and that is sometimes his biggest downfall. Although low self-esteem isn't exactly fun for anyone, trust me, I know, for Gladiator it's actually a fatal weakness. His power fluctuates according to his confidence, as seen in Dan Abnett's and Andy Lanning's War of Kings crossover in 2009. Get him to doubt himself or even his abilities for 1 second and he can be defeated by opponents with far weaker abilities than him. A prime example of this is shown in War of Kings number 3 when Rocket Raccoon manages to convince Gladiator his gun will hurt himself and despite withstanding far worse in the past, succumbs to self-fulfilling prophecy and is beaten. Give this story a read for yourself, starting with 1977's X-Men number 107. Number 3, Daredevil and loud noises. Now we all likely know this, but Matt Murdock's loss of vision took away the natural gift of eyesight that we all take for granted, and replaced it with echolocation, an uncanny radar sense that allows him to basically see things through sound. Unfortunately for many heroes, their greatest strength can also be their greatest weakness, and such is the case for Daredevil, as his extreme sensitivity to sound can completely incapacitate him. In Daredevil Volume 2 West Case Scenario, he is subjected to a high decibel ultrasound, 120 decibels to be exact, by the dastardly Purple Man, who knows his weapon is excruciating for a man of Daredevil's gift. Daredevil's head spins and he looks like a man under a sorcerer's spell, leaving him completely vulnerable to a follow-up attack. The same can actually be done using intense smells as well, since his sense of smell was also heightened after losing his eyesight. Although Daredevil can and does go toe-to-toe with pretty much anyone in a fight, he will get utterly emasculated by a stink bomb or a supersonic sound. Check out more of Matt Murdock for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1964's Daredevil number 1. Loud noises! Number 2, Green Lantern and wood. If you're a bit confused, that is totally okay. This is not a weakness that is common across all of the Green Lanterns, it's specific to the very first Green Lantern, Alan Scott. Despite being armed with a magical ring and a spectrum of pretty much limitless powers, Scott seemed to have another fatal weakness other than the color yellow. He first realized that this might be a problem for him after he was hit in the face with a wooden log, and then after a series of wins and victory laps, Scott realized tree bark might be his potential undoing. Put a little more succinctly, items made of wood cannot be lifted or broken by energy from the ring, nor can barriers of emerald energy stop projectiles crafted from wood. Apparently this vulnerability to wood was because the green flame was an incarnation of green growing things, and thus could not be turned against them. Guess you could say he, can't get wood. Check out the first Green Lantern for yourself, starting with 1940's All-American Comics number 16. Number 1, Captain Marvel Jr. and his own name. Poor Freddie Freeman. Out of all of the weaknesses on this list today, he probably drew the shortest straw because his weakness is his own name. If Captain Marvel Jr. tries to introduce himself to a superpowered ally, or for some reason feels the need to say his name in the middle of a battle, he'll instantly be transformed back into Freddie Freeman, a ordinary young lad who relies on a crutch to walk. Or if he speaks his superhero alias aloud in the guise of Freddie Freeman, he'll transform into a shimmering beacon of muscly justice and give himself away. Jerry Ordway tried getting around this flaw during Captain Marvel Jr.'s sporadic appearances in Teen Titans between 1995 and 1998 by having Freeman refer to himself as CM3, since he was one of the 3 members of the Captain Marvel family at the time. Also, he could avoid accidental transformations, but that change didn't really stick around. Honestly, for someone who inspired many of Elvis's onstage looks, that is one weakness that I don't know if I can overlook. Check him out for yourself in his first DC appearance in 1995's The Power of Shazam, number 3.
Number 10, nukes. Nukes are a pretty big deal to humans. If you launched one, boom, right at a Kryptonian, you could hold them off probably for a little while. We see this happen in Batman vs Superman, and it takes inspiration from The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. In the graphic novel, we see Superman go after a nuke, and after he gets a little too close for comfort, he withers up like an old apple. All that radiation gets to him. It's kind of similar to what we see on screen actually. But luckily our sun was in field of view for old Clarky, and he charged himself back from Michael Jackson's Thriller mode back into handsome Henry Cavill mode. Before we continue on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, it does wonders for our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's go check out some more weaknesses for Superman. Number 9, red sun radiation. While our sun can certainly recharge the Man of Steel back into punch mode, red sun radiation can do the opposite of heal. It can damage Kryptonians because it gives off more radiation. So in Superman War of the Supermen, we see a red sun instantly start to weaken and suffocate Superman and Supergirl. It's because red sun radiation replaces the yellow solar energy in Superman's cells, eliminating his powers. Red sunlight was actually the main source of solar energy near Krypton, but Clark spent so much time around our sun on this planet that it clearly works better for him. Except for his mustache, whenever it comes to that. Doesn't really seem like anything works with that upper lip problem that we have. Number 8, high-pitched noises. You ever accidentally scrape your fork against the plate and that high-pitched squeal that comes from it makes your spine want to like pop out the back of your neck? God, it's the worst. My sister almost kills me every time I scrape just a tiny thing, I swear to God. Well, even Superman gets weak when he hears high-pitched noises like that as well. Now, of course, they're much louder than just a fork. See, his super hearing makes Black Canary and Silver Banshee a nightmare for him, because they can get pretty loud. So Batman tries this out against Clark in Batman vs Superman as well, and for a moment or two, it actually works on holding him back. So maybe if Bruce had the world's biggest dog whistle, he could mess him up. Or that cowboy guy that sings like really high pitched in the mountains. I'm sure if he belted, Clark would definitely explode, perhaps. Number 7, magic. Superman can probably take 1,000 bullets to the body and then walk away like it's no problem. But the magician David Blaine, you never know, he could be pretty threatening to a Kryptonian. That's right, magic can indeed hurt Superman. His biomatrix is a powerful asset, but the strength in it can be used against him, specifically in the form of radiation that's found in magical energies. Electromagnetic or extra-dimensional signatures disrupt his force field, weakening him, of course. Now, it depends what kind of magic is being used and how much of it is being shot out at him, but magic in general has unpredictable effects on him, and his magical enemies have often been the ones that are the most dangerous or come out on top, at least for a little bit. Number 6, the Black Tide. In Action Comics issue 788, Superman is in a world where the air is filled with fire and a force called the Black Tide. This mysterious force causes Superman's chi flow to be disrupted. So he suffers in fatigue and pain until he gets a nice acupuncture appointment. Yeah, in the very next issue, we see Clark getting back on his feet with a few well-placed needles. He even asks if they're the world's strongest needles, and she's like, nope, they're just in the right spots. So acupuncture, it's the only remedy that realigns his spirit, who knew? Number 5, love. Yeah, of course I said it. When it comes to weaknesses, some would say that it's just the thing you love most used against you. Now this of course has come to light in many comics, movies, TV shows. It's not necessarily new. The whole damsel in distress thing, of course it's gonna work. Where in order to keep Superman to bend at your will, you just gotta get Lois Lane or Martha in your custody, and then you can get Superman to go and fist fight Batman. It's the best. And then we watch the movies eating popcorn. We're like, yes, keep fighting. In Batman vs Superman, we see Barry Allen pop in from the Speed Force to let Bruce know that Lois Lane is the key. What key? What was he talking about? Well, that plus the nightmare sequence, it was apparent in that film that she was the key in preventing the Man of Steel from going evil and causing this world to look like chaos. Their love is keeping Kal-El from going nuts. Check it out. Or lead. Superman is the best at playing hide and seek. He can see through walls, so no matter where you're hiding, odds are he's already found you if he's looking for you. But if you were to hide behind a lead wall, you just may win that game of hide and seek against a Kryptonian. How crazy is that? He has vision that matches the properties of X-ray. They call it X-ray vision, but the thing is, X-rays don't work with lead. That's why when you get an X-ray done at the dentist, they slap that bulletproof vest on you, then they like plug their ears and run out of the room. It's because that's lead. That's a no-go in the hashtag X-ray life. So it can actually help Superman out a bit though. See, as lead can block out kryptonite radiation. So it's, you know, it can kind of help Superman, but it can also be used against him. Superman's got a real love-hate relationship with pencils, it seems. Pencils. Number 3, Muhammad Ali. I have to include this because it's too amazing not to mention. Okay, so earlier in this list, I talked about how red sun energy can weaken a Kryptonian. So even though Superman is weak now, he's still probably at least a really strong dude, right? Well, there was once one comic book issue where a weakened Superman legit had to fight Muhammad Ali, and it was more intense than Mayweather vs. McGregor, at least in my opinion. Definitely yours too. See, this one shot made its debut back in 1978, written by Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams. And it featured the Man of Steel and of course Muhammad Ali. And it was part of the all-new collector's edition where this alien named Ratlar, who's part of a species known as the Scrub, they visit Earth. And they demand that we pick our best fighter to go against theirs. Now of course theirs being a behemoth named Hunya, so yikes. Now, if we refuse, well, the Scrub will then destroy the planet. So Muhammad Ali argues that since Superman isn't technically from Earth, Muhammad Ali must be the one who fights, which is so amusing for us. We're like, yes, thank God, do it. So Ratlar is amused by this and he wants to know who is better of the two. So he pins the two champs up against each other and the fight is set to take place on Bodes, which is orbiting a red star. So no more crazy powers for Superman, just old fisticuffs. And Muhammad Ali drops the Man of Steel. I would say I'm surprised, but Ali is literally the greatest, so not too surprised here. Number 2, psionics. Kryptonians are vulnerable to psychic and telekinetic attacks. Superman may be stronger than most things in existence. His mind is still just as capable of being brainwashed like most of us. He's vulnerable to magic, so when it comes to psionic attacks, those tend to work against the Man of Steel in a similar manner. Telekinesis can attack Superman's molecular structure, so when the damage is on a microscopic level, it's hard to overcome and pinpoint. The Green Lantern chip at one point took over the Kryptonian's mind in issue 10 of Injustice Gods Among Us Year 2. He's small but mighty, but he can also think small, so you're kinda screwed. And number 1, you guessed it, Kryptonite. Most of us heard the song Kryptonite by Three Doors Down growing up. In fact, now that I mentioned it, it's probably stuck in your head. So good. My first song I ever learned on guitar. That's right, Kryptonite. Okay, since the final days of Krypton, its remains were now deemed radioactive after the whole explosion thing, and parts of Kryptonite were now floating around in space. This crystalline substance has a specific radioactive wavelength that's lethal to those who are native to its reality. The most common form is the type we see in Batman vs Superman. It's called bright green kryptonite, and it's poison to Kal-El. In the comic Batman and Superman issue 44, he gets a blast of kryptonite shards to the face, and it does not look pleasant in any manner.
Coming in at number 10, we've got the Riddler. Of all the supervillains throughout the universe, the Riddler is one of the most consistently interesting. He's an excellent foil for Batman, you know, the world's greatest detective. By setting up intricate puzzles and riddles for Mr. Wayne to solve, he provides all sorts of intrigue. Edward Nygma, what a name by the way, isn't terribly physically strong, nor does he have any sort of energy beam ready to fire. He's just extremely good at deductive reasoning and is able to plan very far ahead using his vast knowledge of eclectic things. He could probably be a master criminal if he wanted to, pulling off heists like no other without ever coming close to being caught. Unfortunately, he has a major weakness. He wants people to solve his riddles. He wants to be found. He's compelled to leave clues behind, pretty much no matter what. There could be a clean getaway right in front of his masked face, and he'd still find a way to leave behind some sort of tip for the folks looking to solve this crime. Really, anytime the Riddler loses, it's his own doing. You have to feel sort of bad for the guy at this point. I'm sure it was fun at first, but now he probably just wants to make a clean getaway and write some mystery novels or something. Maybe someday, Edward. Maybe someday. Coming in at number 9, we've got Thanos. Believe it or not, Thanos has a similar weakness to the Riddler. Sure, he's a gigantic purple powerhouse of a supervillain with a drove of committed lackeys that have crazy powers of their own, but he still fails in the same way as Mr. Nygma. Well, almost the same way. Throughout his various reigns, Thanos manages to take down countless heroes, even without the full power of the Infinity Gauntlet. He's got size, strength, speed, and mastery over all sorts of disciplines. Really, there's no reason for Thanos to fail at whatever he puts his mind to, but he still does somehow. It seems as though he believes that he's unworthy of his own power, therefore making subconscious mistakes and leaving openings for others to thwart his plans. So even if his weakness isn't apparent to those trying to bring him down, he'll lead them to victory somehow. Wow. Coming in at number 8, we've got the Penguin. Remember kids, smoking kills. The Penguin is another villain from the Batman universe who really doesn't have any superpowers per se. What he does have though is ruthless business sense, endless funds, and a whole lot of crazy technology. Plus he's based on a penguin. Incredible stuff really. His genius level intellect and surprising combat skills make him a formidable foe for sure, and that's not even counting his birds. But there's one thing that brings this flightless lad down. It's not an allergy to some sort of supernatural element, nor is it a proclivity for melting when exposed to heat. It's a self-inflicted wound. The Penguin has a weakness for cigarettes. That's right, death sticks, coffin nails. Didn't his mother tell him it was a terrible habit? I suppose he didn't like his parents too much to start with, but still, if there's one weakness that is extra terrible, it has to be one for smoking, even if it is through one of those fancy long-handled opera-style holders. Coming in at number 7, we've got Venom. Eddie Brock has had a rough go, hasn't he? The poor guy lost everything, decided to blame it on Spider-Man, and then got bonded with a symbiotic alien. Well, at least he got some wicked powers out of it. He's got all sorts of superhuman physical abilities, as well as the ability to block out Spidey's spider senses. Add in night vision, venomous fangs, and of course shape-shifting, and you've got a powerful villain slash anti-hero slash whatever else Venom decides to do. But alas, there are a couple of rough weaknesses that make this symbiote hunter a little less effective than he'd be otherwise. Firstly, there's the fact that fire, or really any form of intense heat, really does a number on him. Even a match could prove to be a little too much for poor Venom depending on the circumstances. Fire can be more or less avoided if you're careful though. His other weakness is a little more omnipresent. It's sound. Loud noises can take out the big lad. It really disturbs the alien. And Venom seems to operate largely in New York City, which isn't exactly known for ever being quiet. Tough break, big guy. Coming in at number 6, we've got Electro. Spider-Man, you've got it too easy. All your enemies have weaknesses that are super exploitable. You'd think that a man who can harness the power of electricity would do well, especially in a big city, but it seems as though his spirits are easily dampened. Get it? Hold on. So Electro can generate all sorts of electricity, which is extremely useful when he weaponizes it. He can also propel himself along with electromagnetic energy and even teleport by turning himself into electric current and jumping into wires. That all sounds super great, right? Like, it's nice to be Electro, but it's too bad that water can essentially stop him in his sparky tracks. There's the old idea that electricity will travel quickly through water, electrocuting anyone in contact with the liquid. Well, I mean, when it comes to Electro, water will just short circuit him. Womp womp. This wouldn't be too big of an issue, but Electro lives on Earth, you know, the planet covered in water. Coming in at number 5, we've got Red Hulk. After a lifetime of hunting the Hulk, General Thunderbolt Ross decided it was time to take matters into his own hands, his own red hands. Assisted by AIM and the intelligentsia, he becomes a Hulk of his very own, this time more crimson than green, and then he sets out to find and fight the Hulk. The more power he draws, the hotter he gets though, so as he goes harder in the paint, the more likely he is to overheat, and if that happens, it's game over. I suppose that's a weakness most people have. If you fight too hard, you're gonna pass out, but the Red Hulk takes it to a brand new extreme. Coming in at number 4, we've got MODOK. This one might seem obvious, but it's worth mentioning. MODOK, or a mental organism designed only for killing, was once an ordinary man. George Tarleton was a skilled technician who ended up joining AIM. He knew they were a little radical, but not to the extent that he found out later on. The organization altered George into a super intelligent being, which made his dome grow to unheard of sizes, and then realized they should probably give him a way to move around. Thus, the Doomsday Chair was born, carting MODOK around by levitating. He would think circles around everyone, using his brilliant mind, and even had psionic powers, but if he's rendered chairless, it's game over. Or if someone turns his power off. Coming in at number 3, we've got Harley Quinn. Another genius with an Achilles heel, but Harley's really has nothing to do with her own limitations. She's just a sucker for love. Or manipulation if you look at it objectively. The Joker, while serving time on Arkham, managed to brainwash poor Dr. Quinn. He broke her down and built her back up in his image. She's super smart, super resourceful, and super popular, but she's always got this thorn in her side, Mr. J. When your weakness is an over-dependent relationship with a gaslighting lunatic clown man, you know you've got it rough. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Joker. Speaking of lunatic clown men, wow, who would have guessed? The trickster of Gotham, the prince of pranks, the maniac who causes a lot of problems for everyone. He manages to outsmart and outplay all sorts of powerful folks through sheer ingenuity and madness. Because beyond all those crazy gadgets and brainwashed lackeys, the Joker is just a man. And men are weak to bullets, or knives, or being punched through the chest. Finally, at number 1, we've got Kingpin. And speaking of men, Kingpin loves his wife a lot. Like, enough to make some major mistakes. She does not approve of his criminal lifestyle, but finds herself involved anyways. So when you look to all of the other villains with tragic backstories and Achilles heels the size of Achilles himself, you have to wonder how Kingpin feels. Ask him about his weakness and he'll respond, "My wife."